as producer Josh mentioned, I've been advocating for you to be a guest on the podcast for a long time.
Okay.
And I have felt a little friction with my co-host here.
Oh, yeah?
And when asked previously about, because I've had so many of my family members on the show,
Oh,
I've
have you?
asked previously, like, hey, who's your go-to family member that you'd love to have on here, or the list? I think you were a little bit lower on the list.
Okay.
I think Uncle Larry was.
Well, I had said if I had a dream guest, it would have been my Uncle Tony. He has passed. He has passed, but he was the crazy wild uncle that every family has.
So a dead guy
Right. Yeah.
has the higher seating.
He would be very interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that you liked it. But Luke, in your perspective, why is there so much friction from Leighton in having you on this show? Can we just get into that?
You know, I think my expertise is very niche.
Okay.
Especially for a business community. I'm good at planting churches.
Okay.
And building furniture.
Okay.
So not a lot of those, a lot of people are cluing into.
So I'm hearing franchising.
Yeah.
I'm hearing, skilled.
Look, I've seen the furniture that's sitting in Ivy's. Okay.
You know what?
Hey,
Maybe we're on something here.
locally
made.
Yes.
I like that. I like that quality.
Garage to table.
Right.
Literally.
Literally. Garage to table. It's a new movement.
It's a new movement.
But Luke, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
And listen, we do talk primarily about business, primarily about local business in Shreveport Bossier, but we also talk about other things like concepts like the ideal will,
Yes.
where we get into spirituality, relationships, things like that.
Well, even even nonprofits have an organizational side,
Absolutely.
right? And Luke doesn't tend to like the organizational side. That's not his sweet spot. I remember being in meetings and it's like, hey, the balance sheet, we want to do these things. Money doesn't look there. And he's like, yeah, well, we'll just pray about it, and that doesn't strike a chord with my business mind. Like, well, okay. But so there is give and take, there is a faith and dependency side with a church, but there's also, it is ran like a business. It has to be, or it will go bankrupt like a business would.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
So Luke, in that vein, right, as somebody who has started churches, right, you go into these places, you recognize a need, you do a little survey. Like, how do you know this is where I want to be, or this is where I want to start something? Or does that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different processes to that. Some of that where there is a specific need, and you see a big need for a new faith community. Some of it is just a passion on your heart, that you've always had a heart for the city, something like that. So, and there's lots of different analysis about where to pinpoint. There's a targeted analysis process that we use, the TAP process, that different companies run to go in and do surveys and figure it out to try to say, okay, this would be the best place for a church.
Like,
So
would
what
a
do
church,
they-
is there a need, and would it succeed?
Would
Kind
it
of type thing.
would it succeed? Or if your target demographic is lower income, and then you're trying to plant in uptown Dallas, that's not. You could go 2 miles south and have a lot better success. And so it just helps. Who you really trying to reach? Are you going to be able to do that in this area? And it helps navigate so that most church planters, and I'll say this as a church planter, we have a lot of vision and a lot of passion and not a lot of intellect as to the strategic step. And I think most visionaries are that way. They can see the picture. They want to get there. The path to get there seems to, not be there. And so they make a lot of really dumb decisions.
And so talk about the organization you're affiliated with.
Yeah, in 2016, we started a church planting organization called Excel. And we try to spot high-level leaders, set them up for success, send them out and support them.
And so since 2016, how many churches have y'all been affiliated
we're about
with?
500. We'll plant 65 churches this year. 30 of them will be outside the continental U.S., and about 35 will be inside continental U.S.
Yeah.
So we got a large planting stream in Cuba, large planting stream in Mexico, and a few we're planting around the Austria, Germany area.
500.
500, yeah, yep.
And now this is not a denominational driven thing, right?
No, it's not.
There's different philosophies, different.
There's all kind of
backgrounds.
things, and we've tried to partner. We've tried to be really open with this. With kind of our like one thing is that we believe that Jesus is the hope of the world, and that's kind of the thing that ties us all together.
Yeah.
But that's led us down some roads that didn't work out too well, that didn't fit really.
Yeah.
We tried it once,
Yeah.
but yeah. So we plant with Presbyterians and Methodists and Southern Baptist. Assembly of God, you name it, we've done it, and they'll hire us out for like a whole state, like the whole state of Alabama. Methodists in Alabama will say, "Come help us plant churches here," and so we'll come and do their thing. Our secret sauce is soul care of the church planter. We want to care for them well and help them take very strategic steps along the way. So
walk
vision
us
alignment,
through-
those kind of things.
Let's walk through that organization. If someone says, and I know a little bit about it, but just for our listeners, and Josh doesn't know anything about it. Josh may want to plant a church one day.
There you go.
So if someone says, someone has a burden, someone is, working 9 to 5 at a job, they're serving in their church, and they're like, hey, I really want to go plant a church, or they're at an existing church on staff like you were a youth pastor at a large church, and it's like, hey, my next step is to be a pastor, I want to start a church. In partnering with Excel, kind of walk us through what the process looks like.
Well, I said our secret sauce is soul care, and it is. What we would do is you would come and attend a connection event, which we have 9 regions all over the U.S., and you would attend one of those. Again, those are a lot of fun. We have some teaching. We have something like we'll have one next Thursday in Dallas, Top Golf. We'll have an hour of teaching and 2 hours of golf and fun, because the goal is not to teach you more things necessarily. It's soul care. So we want you to have fun. Most church planters can't afford to take their wife on a date. So we'll tell them, hey, bring your wife. When we're done with the thing, you and your wife go to some other bay and hit golf balls, and don't worry about this. So that's
at this event, you're bringing in current church planters. And they are coming in. They get away from their congregation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They get cut loose. They're around peers, right? Because that is, we talk about this a lot as a business owner. Same thing with a pastor. There are not a lot of people that have empathy of what you're going through.
Of course.
And you can't really go to someone in your congregation and just vomit on them, right?
Right.
Because they will use that against you in a deacon
People
meeting.
are terrible.
Hey,
People
this
are the
is our
worst,
family
man.
business. I know.
People are the worst.
People are the worst. So y'all are kind of providing that. They can come, share what they want to share.
Sure.
You're not judging them. You're lifting them up. You're giving them some fuel to go back into the trenches.
We go to a lot of baseball games too. We found that that's a great, because it's a slower pace, and we tell them, every 2 or 3 innings, get up, find a new seat amongst our people, and you're going to meet somebody else they're really good at something that you have a problem with, or just a different ear to some other stage along the way. They're 3 years in. They're 6 months before they launch.
How many people will come to this?
We'll have about 35 or 40. We have about 200 planters in the DFW area that is part of our network.
How do they find out about it?
Word of mouth. That's kind of our thing. Is everything we do. We do not have slick graphics. Our website could be improved. It is word of mouth. It is, I know someone else. And because it's such a unique kind of thing, starting new churches, church planters are real sticky. So they all know someone else that's about to start that wants help. We say church planting is like jumping out of an airplane and assembling your chute as you're falling. And so because there is a short runway, that you've got to get your finances right. You've got to get some people so you have critical mass so you don't feel like a cult. You've got to, all the things that you're doing. And so they're pretty desperate in the beginning. So we try to get them before the desperation starts. So we can be like, let's help you. So you'll come to one of those.
That's and they're meeting people that are already in the game.
They're all kind of, and we kind of go around and like, tell us how old your church is, kind of where you're planting. And so you'll kind of survey the room at that point and be like, oh, they're 6 months ahead of me. I'd love, in planting in an urban context, I would love to go, because that's a lot different than planting in Mooring Sport. If you're planting in downtown Shreveport,
or they might say, "Hey, this is a lot more than I thought would be."
Everyone says that. Everyone says that. This
I'm not
costs
ready
more.
for this.
This is harder. This is more difficult in my marriage. Everyone says that. Yep, it's because it is.
Well, can I ask a really
Sure.
basic question.
Sure.
Now I'm hearing you talk about 500 church plants, which is blowing my mind. And the fact that you guys are doing this, and I know some of the other guys that are involved, I'm very impressed, number one. But I guess my question is, church is a very old institution.
Sure.
Right? It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And is the market really is it necessary? Is just constantly planting churches? Is there the need for this? Right? Is it? I mean, because I'm just kind of blown away. I'm like, man, you guys are like planting churches all over Alabama, and most people would go, dude, Alabama's nothing but churches. Right. So, like, what is it that is in the market? Do you think that's missing or is needed?
Yeah, I think new churches reach new people. And so Tim Keller and his City to City initiative, the late Tim Keller is a pastor in New York, author, phenomenal. He started a City to City initiative that studied this. I mean, the greatest studies I've seen, and across, 30, 40, 50 years. And he was so good in the current context. That new churches are the greatest way to reach new people. They're the greatest evangelism tool, is what we would say, as you actually share the message of Jesus in the world. So planting churches today are like maybe the Billy Graham crusades of the 80s, because new churches reach new people. So a new church within 3 years of its birth is going to reach about 4 times the number of people than existing churches are. Because church, as the nature of itself, turns inward, and it becomes about the building, the social circles, the community, good things, but it turns inward. And when it turns inward, it's not reaching people out, because when you reach people outside the church and bring them in, they don't fit.
It's messy.
It's messy. You've created this new
and
thing.
we talk about this before with businesses. There's just a point where you stop taking a risk, right? You've built something. Now you shift to where you just don't want to lose what you have.
Yeah. It's amazing to me if I can, like, when I watch, I'm a big fan of watching PGA, watching golf. And it's amazing to me the risk that people will take when they're down 2 strokes and, they turn 14 or 15, a hole 14 or 15, and they will take the risk at the pin because they're down 2. And every church planter, every entrepreneur feels this in the beginning. Yeah. They've got this core desire to do something, and it's all risk. But the risks are pretty small. When, you're planting a church and you got 20 or 30 people and you can go back and get another job, the risks aren't gargantuan. When you're leading a church, and I've got several friends that are leading a church of 3 and 4 and 5,000, the risks that they take are gargantuan. The numbers of, just their electricity bill. Sure. So they can't say the kind of things that they probably need to say from stage because it's going to offend enough people. They're going to leave and they can't pay the bill. Yeah. When you're a church plant, you don't really care about that at the beginning, right? Yeah. It's all passion. It's all like, what's God lead me to do? And it's so much grit. So anyway, to follow our little narrative, they'll come to a connection event, and then the next step is a discovery center, which is like an assessment. So I don't know what the business equivalent of this would be, but assessment, you're going to come in, we're going to help you know your strength finder, we're going to take you through your disc, we're going to take you through your
Enneagram.
Well, we don't do Enneagram because it's just hard to navigate the Enneagram, but we do 5 voices, and then we do primal question. And I think y'all did primal question on this podcast a couple of weeks ago. We let them know themselves, let them know, we ask that question, what's it like to be on the other side of you? And every leader needs to know that. What's it like to be on the other side of you? And we tell these, who speaks truth to pastors? Nobody normally. Nobody speaks truth because everybody's part of their congregation. They can pull the God card. And, I'm very hesitant when people do that and they say, God told me this. I was like, did he?
Let's also talk about, because a lot of church planters have had formal training, right?
Sure.
At seminary.
Yeah.
But seminary's not talking about this kind of stuff.
None of this.
Seminary's talking about how to build a sermon.
Sure.
How to have a deacon meeting. How to
10% of what you actually do.
Yeah, exactly.
On the ground.
And so there's nothing.
Which I think is equivalent to business schools. There's a lot of business schools that train you.
Well, we talked about that. Josh is like, I have a business degree.
Yeah.
I learned everything after by reading books.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which I think, that's the other really cross-platform is every good leader is a lifetime learner. Mm-hmm. And if you think because of your pedigree of what you came from, our dad was a church planter. Mm-hmm. That taught me very little. Yeah. Seminary taught me almost nothing.
Yeah.
And I was there full-time 4.5 years,
yeah.
2 degrees. And, and you just learn it in the trenches, and leading with the team.
Yeah.
So we do an assessment process. They meet with a licensed counselor, because the pressure of this is going to really, if there's any...
Because you're also putting their spouse through the ringer.
Putting the spouse,
right? Family dynamic's a big deal, right?
A lot of people...
have
yes.
kids,
sure.
plans,
Yeah. Well, we look at debt. If you're coming into this thing with a lot of debt and you got a special needs kid at home, and your wife's like 40% on board,
yeah.
We're going to give you a green, yellow, or red light. We're going to give you a yellow light, and we're going to say you need to address, and we'll give them a report. These are 5 or 6 things we see in a very loving and caring way that you please press pause and do your family this favor to work out these issues before you jump into the fire. And then we give you permission to do this. Yeah. And a lot of them receive it very well. They're like, thank you. And they go and work on it. And I feel like their churches are much healthier when they leave that.
And you ask what equivalent to business would be, and there's really not.
Well,
there should
this
be
is a great incubator.
Yes.
It's like for somebody who wants to start a business, they should go through this and say, hey, man, is your life in the right spot? Or, hey, lady, is your life in the right spot?
And I would say for us, having a business coach does some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they tell you no.
Do your business coaches work more as an actual coach or a consultant? Are they asking you the questions to draw out the best out of you and give you focus, or are they saying that doesn't seem like a great idea because of your P&L?
So I have both.
You have both.
And you have both, right? You're in a consulting group. That's more
so I've got a round
industry
table.
specific.
Round
that
table.
is like, hey, this is what you could ask. They're non-competitive peers you could ask, and it's industry specific.
Right.
But then our business coach, Aaron, how much does he know about the lumber business?
Nothing. He's just asking you questions.
So he's really a coach. He's identifying, he's shining the light on dark spots of, hey, this is a weakness of yours, or, actually he doesn't even shine the light. He makes you shine the light.
Of course. That's what a good coach does.
Yeah. And so we have both. So I have a company in Austin that's more industry specific with trades that's being like, hey, don't do that. Don't reduce your price.
Well, we tell every church planter and pastor that they need both.
Yeah.
Every pastor needs a good counselor.
Yep.
Every pastor, church planter needs a coach, and they need some kind of consultant.
Yeah.
Someone who's further along, could be a peer, could be a professional relationship.
And I think that's where we get confused of a coach and a mentor. Right, a mentor's been where you want to be, but they don't make good coaches. They don't have time for you.
No, I'm a terrible coach. I'm a terrible coach.
Yeah, exactly.
So every time people are like, "Hey, will you coach me?" I was like, "It would not be good."
Yeah.
Like you could buy me coffee and we could talk an hour, and I'll maybe share some ideas.
Yeah.
But I'm not a good coach.
Yeah.
Because the coaching process is laborious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just about asking, I think I want to talk about what I want to talk about more than I want to just ask you questions.
Being a coach is an art form.
Oh, and some people are great at it.
And you don't, and that's where the confusion is. It's like, well, I only want a coach that's done what I'm doing. I'm like, well, Michael Jordan had a coach.
Sure.
Nobody was the best basketball player coaching him. All the top tennis players, golfers, they all have coaches. None of them were as good as the person they're coaching, right?
So, the coach, someone standing outside and looking from like a fresh perspective at you and asking you these difficult questions, because, we get lost in the whirlwind of our day-to-day stuff. And it's really hard to work on the organization while you're working in the organization.
Yeah.
So you've got to be disciplined to back out and think through it, or you got to have someone else, like a good coach, using Michael Jordan as the example, that says, hey, listen, every time you go to the left, they're slow. You should do that more often, or something like that.
Sure.
So, and we encourage all of our planters and pastors to have those relationships. I think they're very important.
Are y'all connecting them with coaches, or?
Yes, we have a coaching network. We have the coaching business can be a lucrative one. I've looked at what it costs just to get some of these certifications, and we've gotten a couple of them, and some of them are not very helpful. It's just to be able to put some stamp on it. Some of them are very helpful.
Yeah.
So we connect them with a coach after some training. We provide that coaching for free for them for 3 years, every other week for 45 minutes.
And that's separate than counseling.
That's separate than counseling.
And are they on their own for counseling, or do y'all?
They're on their own for counseling. And sometimes coming out of that Discovery Center, it's mandated that they go to counseling. And mostly that's connected to trauma in the past. If you don't deal with your trauma in the past, you're going to pass it on. And it's real dangerous with pastors. And this is, an age where church hurt's such a big deal. Most church hurt comes from pastors who have not dealt with their trauma in the past. Yeah. And they're now using their platform. They don't even know it. The toxicity is just leaking out onto everyone around them. Yeah. And no one can speak truth to pastors. And so they get big enough, and they hurt people enough. And the other unique thing, and this is my belief, is that, we believe that every believer has spiritual gifts. Spiritual gifts are supernaturally empowered gift to serve the body of the church. So things like Scripture would talk about hospitality or generosity or leadership. You're entrusted with these gifts, and church hurt is so impactful when people or pastors or just Christians use their supernatural gifts instead of building the body, they use them to hurt the body. And that's why it's so much harder. And that's why there's whole counseling genres right now that I'm ill-equipped to speak of. But trained people would of church hurt because of that.
So we talked about the sort of market for churches earlier. I see a real emergence in the market for what you're doing, and I'll tell you why. In traditional church structures or denominations that we all know of, they all have hierarchy, right? So they all have if it's Presbyterian, they report to the Presbyterian or the Catholic Church. Sure. The Southern Baptist Convention, right? There's hierarchy in all these denominations. For the churches that you're starting, many of them that are probably non-denominational, I would guess. I'm not sure, but what I find is that in this new, because it feels like there's a generational desire to move out of these denominations into non-denominational. You hear so many people say, well, I'm non-denominational. It sounds great to say, right? But the challenge in that comes when that pastor becomes part of a hierarchy into literally CEO of the organization.
Correct.
Head dictator.
Sure.
Right? So the danger in the human nature of the person who becomes pastor / CEO, and some of these guys have been with very famous names that run very big organizations, and they seem to be accruing a lot of wealth, and there's church hurt there. But ultimately it feels like what you're doing is you are trying your best to mitigate the danger of what could come from pastor CEO. Does that sound about right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. But that takes a leader. It takes both a leader and a structure, I think. It takes a leader who is humble enough to say, I know with absolute power, I'm going to be a terrible person. And so because of that, and because I think the biblical principles provide for it, we set up a structure where, I know Jason's been on the podcast several times. I do not have absolute power. There are several checks and balances within, even though I'm the founding pastor, did the work in the beginning. There are several other people who can step in and say, dude, you're off.
And how much, we're talking about the XL, it's a para-church organization focusing on church planning.
Sure.
How much authority do y'all institute? Like, do you have are you saying, hey, you have to set up these things to have our blessing? Is there not really much? Or even like, hey, you don't go at this alone. You need to find someone to church. You need to find a counterpart to be a partner, or we're not giving you our blessing.
Well, a lot of it's with money. We're not going to sign you as a church plant and invest our funds in you unless you've worked through the conditions that came out of Discovery Center, or you got a green light, you're ready to go. That you're not going it alone. If you got to go with a team. We're not sending anyone out by themselves.
So it's there. So let's go back through it again. So Discovery Center. Some of them might already have a team.
Sure, they're ready. Some of them meet their team at Discovery Center.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, you're planting there. Well, instead of going to Birmingham, I'll just go with you to Mobile.
And you might have somebody through a Discovery Center. You're like, hey, you're not going to make a great lead pastor.
Sure. But
you'll make a great pastoral care person on a team.
Right. You're a great number 2 seat.
Let's put you with this person.
1,000%.
And so, yeah, because I one of the stats I remember reading years ago in seminary is like over 90% of church plants with one pastor fail. Right. And it's like astronomical how much a difference having two pastors is. And that's really kind of goes into business too. I think that when I think of my strongest businesses, I have partners in those.
Yeah.
So Luke, unpack this for me, because
Yeah.
this feels like a newer thing, and maybe it's not. So he just mentioned the idea of this 2-pastor, and there's churches with 5 pastors.
Sure.
And as I look at the lay and how I came up, there was a pastor and a song leader who was also the youth pastor.
Yeah.
And so it was a very
And sat on the stage.
this was it.
behind
That's
them on
right.
the side.
That's right. It was
On the
like,
thrones, man. They had
On the
thrones in the
thrones,
back.
that's
Exactly
Yeah.
right. So now you go to churches and you'll see 5 pastors, and
Sure.
every Sunday there's somebody different talking, and you're like, I don't know who's in charge here.
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, or your feeling, your belief,
Sure.
what's that sweet spot, and what do you really need out of a group of leaders for the church?
Well, I think it's contextual for every church plant or every church, and based on the people they're trying to reach, how large they're trying to grow, and the leader themselves. So I do think, we grew up. I said my dad was a church planter, and he was the only guy. So we would move.
staff.
Never had a
We
staff.
never had a youth pastor.
We
were the youth group.
I mean,
though,
we
so,
did, but it was, some guy that did something else, and he was just kind of guilted into it,
Yeah, our youth pastors were like welders. And,
That's exactly what they were. Yeah. Smoking a pack of cigs, walking in, telling us not to do it. Like, y'all don't do that. It's going to kill you. In that grovelly voice. I remember that.
That's great.
So that, what you ask what they need, I think it's contextual. I do think that I think there's a biblical precedent for it. Ephesians, I don't want to get into the details of it, but the book of letter of Ephesians, Paul mentions what we call the fivefold ministry in the APES, the apostle, the prophet, the shepherd, the evangelist, and the teacher. And he says all 5 of these gifts are given to the local church to build up the body. Well, in the church growth movement in the last 40 years, we expected all 5 of those gifts to be present in one person. And I don't think they're present in one person. And so the CEO pastor model, where you got 150 people, they're expecting that pastor to be an apostle, to start new work, to be interested in the missions, to be a prophet, a truth teller, to be an evangelist. He's going to win everybody to Christ. He's proselytizing all the time. To be a shepherd, he's going to come and do your funeral and do your wedding and get the hospital visits. And he's also somehow going to have the bandwidth to do amazing teacher, that he's going to be able to study the Greek and study the Hebrew and convey that every week. Well, no one person can do that, I don't think. And so this is a much healthier model for me to saying I don't have to have all 5 of those gifts. I have that apostolic gift. I love to start new things, which is why we started a church organization that plants new churches. Our church ourselves have planted several churches. And so I get to scratch that itch, and I get to operate where I'm gifted in that apostle, in that thing. A bit probably of a teacher. I'm really low in the shepherding and these other ones, but Jason is great at them.
Great.
I mean, he loves to counsel people,
encourage people.
My counseling is like, bro, stop it. Just stop doing that, man. People come to me with issues like, bro, just keep your pants on, man. We can fix this.
Right.
But a lot of people, that's so. It has just been such a healthier thing for me to say the ones there's balance of power at the top. That's helpful for me. Because I would be terrible without accountability. And I'm not forced to operate to work with my left hand all the time to do things I'm not really good at.
Well, and this also goes back to the question you had: do we need new churches? Right. Well, to go into an existing church, we got another fly. Luke, you need to work your magic here and kill a fly like you
I
did
know, man.
earlier.
Y'all got a good collection of these.
I don't know where they came from. They're slow moving big ones too, man. There's some monster flies. So what? They're getting out of the cold. But to go into an existing church, just think of an existing church that has 300 in attendance, right? They've been around for 40, 50 years. Their deacons have probably been there the whole time and kind of have control. They hire a new pastor and bring him in. Well, how long do you think it's going to take for that pastor to be able to bring his vision or to, you see what I'm saying? And so that's where, I remember reading Ed Stetzer, I think, had a book, and he's like, to go into an existing church, it takes no less than 10 years for a pastor to get everybody on board to change. So it's like, do you want to give up 10 years of your life, or do you just want to start from scratch, right? And so that's where it goes into, this model that he's talking about. You couldn't go into, I remember, our dad going into an existing church, and it took years just to stop doing a Wednesday night service. And it's like, or Sunday night service.
Well, you even think about this as with the size of churches, not even just the history or the tradition they have, which is very strong. But just the size of a church, it's easy. Our church is probably a church of 400 right now. It is very easy for us to navigate cultural differences and change things when we need to change them. If we see a big need, and we're kicking around right now, what would it look like to have more weekend services that start on Thursday night to reach some of these families that are in the travel ball stuff. So, I want them to be there on Sunday. They have committed to a travel ball scenario, but I still want them to be ministered to and to be taught. And what would it be like, instead of doing a third Sunday morning service, to do a Thursday night service? But other traditions can't, they're too big to change like that. But we can, let's try it. Yeah. Let's try it. And see what happens.
Well, what's really eye-opening about this for me, because, I have my own sort of outsider thoughts about this. And, I was raised in a very small town Southern Baptist church. So of course, I've got lots of damage that comes along with that. But ultimately, what is really eye-opening in hearing you talk and hearing you really unpack this for me is you're very irreverent. There's a real irreverence. And I mean that in not a bad way, but I look at the tradition of church and the institution with a lot of reverence. Like, this is a precious thing, even if I don't just long to be a part of the Catholic Church,
sure,
I look at that with a lot of reverence.
Sure.
And I go, wow, there's some really beautiful things that happen within this denomination.
Sure.
Right. And, everything from building aesthetics and like just beauty and things that can come from liturgy, like this traditional thing that I really, part of me really longs for. But when I hear you talk about there's an institutional stasis that just cannot be changed, and that you have to work on the outside of the circle. So is there a way to marry the two of these things?
Yes and no. I think there is a reverent irreverence in the fact that we still need those kinds of churches. You talk about growing up Southern Baptist Church. There's still a lot of Southern Baptist churches doing incredible things. And they're always going to reach the certain amount of people. There are some Catholic churches that are doing some incredible things. I was talking to one of their leaders just the other day. They're doing some incredible work, and I'm so thankful for what they're doing. But that's why we need more churches that are going to reach the different kinds of people. You think about if God answered our prayers that we're praying, and more people would come to faith, and we would have something like the Businessmen's Revival or the Second Great Awakening or something, these great historic revivals we've had in our past. If that happened, and 90% of Shreveport-Bossier came to faith in the next 3 months, they would have no place to go. We don't have enough churches to hold them. We would need 10,000 more churches to hold them. So we need more churches everywhere. And the church is so unique because it's going to find its niche, because the people are going to reach the people that they're around.
Sure. Yeah.
And so there is some uniqueness in that. And I love that, I am reverent to the history and the tradition and the message, right, of Christianity. We're not changing that. The models, you can have any kind of model, which is what I love about church planting, because we have people planting churches on the metaverse. It's all digital, and they're having services every week, and more evangelism's happening on the metaverse with the goggles and on Twitch. Things that I don't even understand. They're on there. They're sharing the gospel. They're meeting atheists and people, and it's become this. We're having churches of 1,000 people on the metaverse that are digital, that then become actual physical churches. There's one in Sacramento right now that started here, grew, it went digital to physical. Amazing things. But, the Methodist Church isn't thinking about that on a Sunday morning, how we're going to reach people in the metaverse. Yeah. That's why I love church planting, because they are the people who are just thinking so outside the box of how are we going to do this. This whole new, kind of the new talk right now is micro churches, and these are churches that are really small, 10, 15, 20, that are normally organized around some kind of affinity of need, and we're meeting this need, like, teenage moms or whatever it is, and you're reaching them and you're providing care, meeting emotional needs, but also bringing the gospel. And you're basically, so there's all this talk in our world about minimal ecclesiology, like what do you actually have to actually be a church, and not just a parachurch or those kind of things. Yep. But I love that discussion, and I love it, and I don't think there's a whole lot of answers yet. We're still kind of in the new stage of this. I love it because it's not forcing people who are outside the faith to say you've got to become just like us in order to fit in. It's saying, what do you need? And this is where I think that it ties into business so well, because a good entrepreneur is going to find a niche in the market and saying there's nothing here. And that's what church planters do. There's no church like this. They're not reaching these kind of people. One of the impetus for me to even start a church is, I was a youth pastor for a long time, and we're reaching people. And we reached this kid, and he brought his family for the first time, been praying for his mom and dad, His mom and dad come in. I'm serving at a church in Dallas. And they come in, and the first thing they do is see this ginormous chandelier when they walk in. I mean, this thing was, somebody's name is probably on it, that they donated their money in death to get this thing. It probably cost $300,000 for this chandelier. And they didn't stay for church. They said, oh, if you've got that kind of money, we don't belong here. And they left.
Yeah.
Well, that broke my heart. And so, in Planted Covenant, we will never have chandeliers like that, but it might be other things for them. I don't know what it is, but that's the beauty of new churches and finding the niche of saying, what does this community need, and how can we meet that need?
Yeah. Yeah. So in a sense, it just really references that God's a big God.
He's a big God. And church planters aren't territorial. When we moved here to plant 15 years ago, I got letters from several big churches in the area that just said, how dare you come and plant a church here? As if that how much arrogance do you think you have as a church leader that you're going to reach everybody in this whole city, that everyone's going to love your pianist or whatever kind of worship you're doing? I mean, that's pretty, to me. And what I love about church planters is there's not much of that competition. Yeah. We're like, listen, we're going to support you. I mean, in our first 3 months as a church, we gave probably half of our budget to other churches. One guy that was moving here and planting a church here in Bossier, just a mile down the road, Leighton met him somewhere. He had some financial need. We had a meeting in staff. We're like, we only have $20,000. He needs 10. Let's give it to him. Mm-hmm. Give him the money. Wait, you would give another local? Absolutely, we would, because we're part of the same team. We're trying to grow the kingdom. Yeah. And that's not an attitude that's happening in a lot of places. But I love that it's happening in kind of this new wave of church planters.
Well, it goes back to a podcast you actually sent me, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, but Craig Rochelle talks about the first generation, second generation,
Absolutely.
Third generation.
Mm-hmm.
So the church planters are this first generation, and so they see the struggle and the need, and so there's just this empathy for other church planters. Mm-hmm. When existing churches are second, third generation that are really just trying to hold on to what has been built.
Yeah.
And protect it.
Yeah, they're trying to, protection. Yep. Yep.
So let's go back to the process here. So with Excel, that first level, they come, they hang out, get some care.
Right.
You have a discovery weekend.
Yep.
How often are y'all doing that?
We do 7 of those a year, all across the United States. We have one in Cuba every year. We have a big one in the Dominican Republic. We just did a digital version last week in Austria with people all over Europe, which is really cool. Yeah. So we do, I guess if you count all of them, we probably do 9 a year.
Okay. So that would be the next step. Discovery Center, if someone gets the yellow or red, it's back into incubation, like, hey, work on these things, or let's partner you with somebody.
Yep.
But if you feel like, hey, this person's ready to go, they have this vision and everything is good to go, what's the next step?
The next step was they would create a prospectus or a launch plan, which, I'm sure you have some kind of version of that in the business world of this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to be, and this is who we are. This is our plan. They normally spend a lot of money on that, and the brochure looks a lot better than the ideas that are inside of it. And so you have to work with them. They'll send that to us, and we'll be like, okay, bro, you can't. You got $1 million budget, but you're going to be bringing in $10,000. You can't. You got to fix that. Yeah. What is your actual plan for this? You don't have a plan in place to do this. So we kind of work with them on that, and they're kind of preview staging. They're finding a place. They're having a few preview services. We're working to support them in that, and we'll give them some funding. Not near as much as they need. Yeah.
And what is that? I remember because we were supported by something. You match something, right? Hey, you raise money.
We do all
match.
of our funding and matching. Yeah, and matching and milestones. So,
And does it depend on their vision and their location of how much money they need, or do you kind of have like this is what it takes, this is the minimum amount it's going to take you to launch a church?
Well, because there's all kind of different churches, they're all kind of different levels. We do have like a maximum that we normally put into a new church, and we release it on milestones. So after you raise your first $5,000, we'll kick in $5,000. After you raise your next $5,000, we'll kick in another $5,000. After you have 50 people in a room as part of your launch team, we'll kick in another $5,000, that kind of thing. There are milestones along the way, which just really help. Even as mature as church planters are, as some of them are, if you gave them all 30, 40, 50 grand up front, it'd be gone. They'd buy the latest projector and, or whatever, the video wall.
Yeah.
So we slow that down. And normally we pay that out over about the 18 month to 2 year process. We'll give them the money. We'll invite them into the network. We'll partner with a coach. And we'll just see how it goes.
It's part of the agreement that, hey, once you become established, you're giving back into the pot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, always giving back. Yeah, that when we brought up the things, when you're getting a green light, you are going with a team, right? You got other people.
And what is it? Let's talk about that real quick. A team. How big does the team need to be, or what needs to be? I mean, you're talking about the APEST. Does all 5 need to be represented on a team?
We would push for that. That would be great. That would be like a level 5 kind of leader that you've got that kind of team. Most teams don't have all that, but they'll have 2 or 3, which is better than just one. Mm-hmm. In one person. What we say is if you're trying to plant. Again, this is so niche. Your audience does not care about this. We talk about churches like rabbit churches, tiger churches, and elephant churches. Okay. A rabbit church is like a house church. It's going to have 8 to 10 people. The pastor is going to work co-vocationally somewhere else. It's never going to grow. When they grow bigger than that, they're going to plant another house church. And it's just a house church movement. Jason Shepard and Church Project in Houston is killing this model, right? So it is kind of a house church movement. Sometimes they add a gathering on the weekends to care for the house church leaders, that kind of thing. So that's a rabbit church. Then a tiger church is a church that, they're never going to be more than 300. That's kind of who they're going to be. That's what Covenant is. They're going to keep planting new churches. So they don't need huge organizational structure. They don't need to raise $500,000.
And it's not because that model is not because they stop growing. It's because they keep reproducing.
They keep both. It's just the time or the trigger of reproduction in a house church a lot quicker, and the rabbit church than the tiger church. Elephant churches are churches that are launching very large. So they'll launch with 300 people. They would consider themselves a failure if they didn't have 1,000 by year 5. So the goal's different.
But what, I guess I'm curious, what structurally separates the tiger from the elephant? Like something structurally, right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you said, hey, this church gets to 300 covenants.
It's really about the vision. It's about the vision that the pastor wants. If the pastor wants this huge organization that it's really like a franchise model. If you have a franchise model and you can just birth new and you're saying, hey, take the culture, take the DNA, go start another church somewhere else. Or if you're saying, we don't really want a bunch of, franchises. We just want one huge thing here. And that's the difference between the two. So the pastor who sees, I want my church to be 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people, then that's what they're going to do.
And some of that would be on context as well.
It'd be on context. It'd be on the level of a leader. I mean, that managing a staff of 150 people makes me sick. I would never want to do that. That is not me. I want to start new things. Yeah. So we set a ceiling at our church of about the 300 to 400 range and said every time we get close to this, we're going to plant a new church.
Yeah, so you get your clicker, and when they're walking through the door, you're like, they got to go. Lock the door.
It's normally not like that. Normally, that's just kind of the vision that sets expectation. Because if you don't talk about that in the vision, and you get to 300, and you're going to plant Covenant Shreveport, we're going to send 50 of our best to start a new church. Your people are like, wait, why would we do that? Yeah. Because it's part of the vision. Because new churches reach new people. Yeah. And so that's what we wanted to do from the beginning. So those are the 3 levels of churches, and depending on the team, that kind of tiger church, what we say, which is what most church plants are in the United States, we say that you need 50 people on a launch team, you need to have raised $50,000 before you're ready to plant, and you need at least 5 like big serving events in the city that you're going to reach. So until you click all 3 of those, you're not ready to start. And so that's what we encourage them to do. Mm-hmm. And the ones that launched before then, they come to, I was with one he's 6 months in, and he did not wait, And he said, dude, can I be the poster child for saying wait?
Yeah.
Because he's got momentum, he's reaching all these people, but he doesn't have the money. You know, giving always lags behind growth. Sometimes 6 months to a year in the church world. So you're growing, but these people, they've never given back. Their finances are a mess. You've got to walk with them through this to kind of reorganize and be redisciplined in some areas. And so anyway, he was saying, dude, let me be the poster child. We launched too early. You told me. And I just went ahead and pulled the trigger because we had so much inertia and so much passion and purpose, and which is great, but it bites you in the end when you can't do payroll, you know. So, and then your family suffers.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and you're like, man, you know, I tell church planners all the time, you do not have to grow up poor. You just need to listen. You need a good coach and a good consultant, and he's going to help you get there. Yeah. You don't have to. Your kids aren't relegated to being poor their whole life.
Yeah. So on this thought, you made me think of something. You know, controversial topic. Some of these big names, right, out there that we would know of, enormous salaries, right, like just mind-blowing salaries. And I start to think to myself, like, well, you know, maybe I should I should get into this game. This sounds pretty good. Like, you got worship pastors that are being paid like crazy money, right? So in your opinion, and I'm sure this is going to go back to context, but do you have any particular feeling on this kind of sticky subject of finances or salary really for church leaders? Like what do you go back to here?
I think it's personal conviction. To me, when you start dabbling in that, you know, I've always kind of structured our pay at our church about what a teacher or administrator in a school would make. That's about the size of salaries that we have. We've given like 3 raises in 15 years, so we're not killing it. We're not even keeping up.
Amen. Inflation. You might want to take a look.
We might want to. Yeah. We might want to do that. Here.
And there's several people on staff at Covenant Church that raise their funds.
All of us at Covenant have intentional employment elsewhere, so that we can have a bigger team of people who have an investment in the thing. So all of us have that on some level. It's really hard to talk about reaching the global poor when you're getting paid, you know, higher 6 figures. It's just really hard. When I was at that church in Dallas, they had a lot of money. And not for salary, but just for investment. And I remember one Wednesday night I'm teaching the kids about being generous and giving back and the global poor. And we could fix poverty in America with the money that the U.S. spends on ice cream, you know, all these, you know, things. And I'm teaching them this on a $100,000 LED screen in the church. Yeah. And it like just strikes me in that moment what a hypocrite I am right now. Because, you know, we could have maybe solved homelessness in our little area if we didn't have this.
Use overhead projectors.
Right.
Yeah, bring them back. Bring it back.
Yeah, so I think it's just to me it's a conviction thing. You know, these higher churches that are having to, they're having to manage a staff of 150. Well, they're bringing in a CEO that used to work for Chick-fil-A, that knows how to manage, and that level. Comparatively in the market, this is what that person's going to make. Yeah. And, you know, the other thing, and I don't think we should slam all of those so hard. It's not what I do, but the stress and things of leading an organization that big does take a certain level. So I've been offered jobs even at churches in this city as a church planter. And they rolled that 6-figure salary across to be a number 2 guy somewhere. Yeah. And I was like, man, that looks pretty good. Yeah. It would kill my soul a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to what we said on the previous podcast, is it always goes back to the mission, right? And that's really has to be the heartbeat of it.
Absolutely.
And so I remember hearing Ed Young Jr. talk years ago, and he that was his, talking about salaries at a workshop. And he just said, we match what they would make in the corporate world, depending on what their skill set is and what they're overseeing. And so, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, I go back and forth, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of sacrifice for the mission at that point.
Sure. And we talk about this all the time in fundraising. Like, if you're a church plant, you're fundraising. And really, I mean, even my job, I would say 25% of my job is still fundraising, because we're committed to giving so much money to start new churches. So I fundraise all year. That's what I do. And it's hard for me to fundraise, driving a luxury vehicle. Yeah. There could be a separation there.
Right.
And so, you understand that. We tell our guys all the time, you got to have skin in the game. Yeah. And if you don't show your skin in the game, your willingness to sacrifice, your willingness to, go without, to move across the country or across the city, then how would a donor look at that? What you're saying. I mean, like, no, I'm not giving to that. That's, there's no skin in the game.
Yeah.
So that's what I would just encourage those, guys to do.
So once they get a team and they kind of meet all that, what's your involvement? Does it just circle back around? And so now they've done it. And so now they're just coming back to this care. You're giving care.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. They're coming to the connection events.
And then eventually you're coaching them through how to plant, how to give birth, right?
Our third thing of, you got to be ready, get a green light. Yeah. You got to go with a team, and you've got to have your heart set on multiplying.
Yeah.
So the whole part of it is, don't be the cul-de-sac in this Christian cul-de-sac where you plant one church, because one church is not going to reach the world. Yeah. One church, if it does a good job, will reach a couple hundred people, and we'll plant a couple churches, hopefully. But when you give birth to a new church, I mean, that's endless. Yeah. And, Exponential did this really big study to try to see how many, what they called level 5 churches, actually planted a church, a daughter church, and that daughter church planted a granddaughter church. So how many got to 3 levels? And you guess what the percentage is in the United States of churches that actually had granddaughter churches? Any idea?
No clue.
4%.
Wow.
4% had a granddaughter church. Less than 1% when another generation had a great-granddaughter church. So most churches aren't planting churches, or they're not transferring the DNA. So, this is what we wanted to do, and we want to see in our people is churches that plant churches that plant churches. Mm-hmm. The multiplying effect. And so, we help them do that. We help push them. We planted our first church when we had 150 people. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, that sounds too small. And it is. But you're always too small. Yeah. Every pastor thinks they're too small. Yeah. The survey done, 10 years ago of when you're ready to plant a church, they did the survey of pastors, 1,000 people, 3,000 people, 5,000 people, 300 people. And every pastor answered, we'll be ready to start a new church when we're 30% bigger than we are. So the 100 people pastor said that, and the 1,000 people pastor. Mm-hmm. So at some point you just got to pull the trigger and start a new thing. So we want them to be multiplying because that's what I'm committed to in my life. I want to see catalytic church planting movements that really change the church planting world, right? Not just plant a church.
So so let's talk about local Covenant Church. How many churches has Covenant Church directly been involved with? I mean, I know we're big in Excel and it's 500 or whatever, but directly.
We're 4 churches. So in 15 years, we've planted 4 churches basically out of our church or out of our granddaughter church, which means that we've given them unlimited resources. We've paid the planter salary as if they were on our staff for several years. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars from us to them. We've
sent teams to go help.
Sent teams,
given equipment.
Sent people. We just moved into a new space 6-7 weeks ago, and we're already trying to figure out how we can give our cases and our trailers and or even using this facility now to start another church. What would it look like for a Spanish-speaking church to start in our church and use it on Sunday evenings or those kind of things? Yeah. So, absolutely, to pay those things, pay those forward and help them, because it's always hard. No one, once you get that kind of momentum going, and it killed us when we planted Shreveport. We did it at the wrong time. I learned a lot of lessons, but we sent about half of our leaders away to go start Covenant Shreveport. Mm-hmm. And they're doing great. They've got their own unique feel. This is not a franchise model. We talked about them as when we did them.
Are you on the big screen every Sunday? Are you beaming in?
No. Well, we talked about them as, we kind of came up with our own word. I heard somewhere else, so I didn't come up with it, called a plampus. It was basically a campus, which a lot of churches have. They have different campuses, but also a plant, because we wanted to eventually birth them. So we set an 18-month runway. In 18 months, you're your own thing. Do whatever you want then. Yeah. For the first 18 months, we're going to be really heavily invested in paying all the bills, helping you get your footing, helping you reach people, helping you preach, going to staff meeting with them, those kind of things. And so that's how we've launched. Everybody launches a different way, but that's how we've done it. So that's what we want to do. We want to help them. The soul care part is they're ready, they get a green light, or they get a yellow light with the things to address. They're going with a team, and they have a heart for multiplication.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. I like it. Now, one of the things we do here every year or every other year is we do a big golf tournament, which is coming up. I think that this podcast will come out before then. or we could move it up in the cube because
It's November 11th.
November 11th.
Yep.
And that's a big fundraiser for
Church planting.
Excel.
Yep.
That money
Yeah,
goes
we
to
raise a lot of
church
money
planting.
to help plant churches, all over the world.
Is that the vision for the cities?
Yeah, vision for the
That's
cities.
where that.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, vision for the cities. And initially when we started it, the vision was just for our city and the cities that we were planting. But now this has morphed into, we'll plant 10 churches in Cuba this year.
Yeah.
And it's a lot cheaper to run a church in Cuba than it is here. $1,800, I can run a church for a year in Cuba, $1,800. So, what we try to do is raise that money and disperse it, really leverage a lot of it on the international churches, Cuba, Mexico.
So just our listeners, I don't know who listens. They're probably all go to Covenant
it's
Church.
your mom.
But they can get involved that way.
Shout out to Leslie though; she will listen. Thanks, Mom.
So we can give that way, participating in fundraisers. Is there a list of Excel churches?
You can go to our Excel website, excelleadership.org, and you can probably find where we're at. I think it's actually excelnetwork.org. Excelnetwork.org is our web, and you can find a list of where we're at.
Whoever's
regions.
listening, there might be an Excel church somewhere that you can support, a church planner.
Yeah.
I just think that, especially in our context, it's still just a bizarre concept for people.
Sure.
Right. And I went to seminary and I helped start the church. I've been at Covenant Church. I'm one of the founding members.
Founding members, man. Let's go. You need a plaque somewhere.
I know. Well, I'm
We're a
waiting
traditional
to
church.
get named something.
We would name a wing after you or something.
Yeah. Well, at least the soundboard.
You could bring in the chandelier.
The chandelier. Hey.
The Leighton Allen.
Yeah. Hey,
Memorial.
if a church shows up and theirs is missing, I took it. I took it.
Okay, so a couple things here that I'm curious about as you've gone through this. So I have a younger brother, right?
Yeah.
And so in some ways we're a lot alike, in some ways we're very different.
Right.
For the listener, do you truly embody the traditional archetype of older brother between the two of you? How do you break that mold, and how are you just like that mold?
Man, I don't know. You'd have to ask Leighton that, I guess. I don't know how to answer that question. The unique thing about it is if, all of us, me, Leighton, and Lydia, we all have very strong opinions. We're happy to share those opinions to anyone that would ask. Yeah. And we think our opinions are correct.
I think that's what Jason, we have a good friend, Ross, who's a therapist in town and was Luke's roommate, played in my college.
Sure.
Played in my wedding and was my first marriage counselor, which is weird. But no, he made the comment to Jason, said it's very unique to have a sibling set of three that are that strong in like leadership.
Well, we had to be. I moved 16 times before I turned 18 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
it was like 20 houses.
We
counted the houses. Every time we moved, it was 2 houses. Parsonage, then a double wide somewhere.
Yeah, double wide. And then maybe we would like rehab, an old beater and then moving that, and then it'd be time to go.
Yeah.
And so we moved every 18 months or so.
Yeah.
And so that made us like have to have this pioneering, I'm going to create my own way. I don't have this safety blanket of a bunch of friends.
Going to a new school.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was part of it. So that's unique that other people have said.
And clearly we didn't blend in necessarily.
Leighton and I both have this entrepreneur kind of thing. Mine is used in the church world. His is used in the business world. And I'm sure Lydia has probably dabbled in a lot of different, things herself that she's been at. So maybe, I think that the typical older brother, younger brother, Leighton always, he was the more creative type with music and humor. Humor was what always kind of, brought levity to any situation.
Sure.
And like you even mentioned,
go ahead.
Yeah, even you mentioned on the basketball court, mine was always the scowl, like this should be better.
Right,
we got to make this better. Do your part.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
Leighton
think
would just make a joke about it.
Well, yeah, and I think that just goes into birth order, right? I mean, you're the middle child, you're fighting for attention, right?
Yeah.
And how do you get attention?
Yeah.
So,
I feel exactly the same way. So my brother, everybody will tell you, like, your brother's a lot funnier than you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Really? He's like, yeah, he is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I guess it's just how it goes, right? I'm a little bit more serious, right?
Sure.
A little bit more like thinking about what needs to be done, and he's just laughing, and having a good time.
And part of that too, and I know that parenting now is that you do subconsciously put a lot of pressure on your firstborn, right?
Oh.
And every time Every single. I remember when
Even without trying it, it
yeah.
just happens. I don't know.
I
how it
remember
happens.
being, when Carter, he's 15 now, so when he was 10, his siblings were a lot younger, and anytime they were upstairs and cried, we yelled at Carter. Carter, what happened? Fix it. We're trying to watch.
Change the diaper.
We're trying to watch The Office.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And you put pressure on them. So.
Yeah, and so some of that, Leighton and I worked on a staff well together. We did that. How long were we on a staff together at the church? Maybe 5 years, 6 years, a long time before he started the real entrepreneur, starting the businesses and doing the things he did.
Yeah.
And that I think that worked pretty well.
Yeah.
I think I probably only yelled once or twice on staff.
Yeah. Well, we started coming to church when?
2011.
Yeah. So I think I started, so it was probably around 2015, 16. Yeah. So about 5 years.
Yeah.
So,
And it was great. Leighton is a great critical thinker about systems. And so that was the main thing. I mean, of course, his musical ability too helped, but the systems thing, and that's where we still suffer as a church, is someone thinking through our systems.
Yeah.
You got Jason the shepherd, we got Jamie doing all the missions, we got me planting the churches and the visionary. I'm always 18 months out. We got nobody really thinking through how do we create a system that
well,
this
let me
works?
just say, it is nice to just be able to get in my truck and leave. To be like, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. Let's go home and watch football.
I'm sure he's got a long list every week. I'm sure he does.
No, I'm still there to help, and I want to support however I can. And
Yeah.
so.
Well, listen, I got to say, just listening to
I think let me wrap that up because I don't want to sound like an a-hole. It's more of I think the older I get, the things that I would used to get so upset about or matter of fact about just aren't that important, right? And I think that just comes with being older.
Right.
It's like, well, it's just not that big of a deal.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? And I'd be like, hey, it has to be done this way. Hey, we can't have any mistakes. Hey, we can't have, and we're just kind of like, because Gene came to my daughter got baptized a couple weeks ago, so Gene came to our service. Well, when Gene,
Your father-in-law,
my
Gene.
father-in-law, who's a perfectionist and has ran a large church that makes no mistakes, right, for 30 years, comes in, I put on a different lens, and I'm like, oh crap. And then of course, I forget to unmute a microphone. One of the words is misspelled, and I'm like, but we just give ourselves, we're just like, that stuff just doesn't matter.
Not as much.
It matters, and it does bother.
I tell you,
but
I know we're out of time, but a couple weeks ago we had we had one of third or fourth service in this new space. Right in the middle of service, somebody in the back in the sound booth hit the light switch and turned all the lights off in the thing. And I'm preaching at the moment, and I'm in the back of my head trying to stay, and I'm like, man, what in the world? What? How does someone just flip is there a kid back there? There's got to be a 5-year-old up there just flipping switches. Yeah. And so, it's one of the things talking about a staff meeting. I was like, we can't have this. We can't have people turn the lights off,
Yeah.
And then I met with a couple last week who are visiting our church. I mean, a high profile, professional couple. And they said when the lights went off and nobody flipped out, we knew that this was church for us.
There you go.
Yeah. And so the church for all kind of people, to be an empowering church. And I was like, okay, but please never do that again. We're not going to lead with that.
I was not there that Sunday, so I was not there.
We're not
Wasn't
gonna,
my fault.
we're not gonna lead with that.
No.
But it is unique, to be an empowering church. You're gonna have to be okay with things not being great all the time,
Yeah.
and you're gonna give new leaders chances to lead.
Yeah.
And you see some of that, and it irks me. But yeah, Leighton just gets in his truck and leaves now.
Hey,
You say you're a 7 on the Enneagram, but we really know you're an 8, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, he's a classic 8 for sure. Got a strong 7 wing, but yeah, you can see it in his face, and he'll just like, okay, good job. I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Well, so I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And I do see a lot of similarity between the two of you entrepreneurially. Like,
Sure.
I mean, absolutely, you guys are in different worlds, so to speak, but there's so many similarities in your vision and your approach and how you're navigating through life. I have to imagine that it's very rewarding doing what you do, to see this legacy that you're developing of churches, and most importantly, church leaders who might not have access to what you're providing.
Sure.
And so I'm super impressed. I'm like,
so.
500 churches. This is amazing. This is great. I mean,
Right.
who knows this here? Like, who
Right.
knows this in Shreveport, Bossier,
Yeah.
that this is happening?
Sure.
I mean, it's amazing stuff. So hopefully all of our listeners will support and
for
look
sure.
for ways to support you in what you're doing. And
Awesome.
thanks for the time.
Well, and this isn't, and stay at your church. Like, this isn't a call to like leave your church. Like, stay there. You know?
Yeah, we actually turn the lights off at ours, so you probably don't want to come to our church.
Yeah. I like that about, we've had people come to our church before and we're like, you should check out this other church. This isn't going to be for you.
I think the message that I have for all the people I talk to is look for ways though to invest and multiply what you have. I think that's the goal.
Yeah.
When you invest even in fatherhood, you invest into your kids. It's going to multiply, right? You're going to have a real multiplication effect in them.
Yeah.
And I want to see that in churches. I want to see that in networks.
Yeah. And that applies
in families.
That applies to business.
Yeah.
For sure, right? I mean, if every one of our employees or team members had the idea of multiplication, that they're taking what they're good at and what their job is and bringing somebody along to train them and replace themselves. I mean, that's how you scale a company. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Thanks
Cool.
a lot.
Like it. All right.
This is great. Thanks,
Yeah.
man. I'm
All right.
glad.
Did we even introduce who he was? I got in trouble for not introducing Jamie.
Well, you
Well, yeah.
you just said
Luke
I was
Allen.
lower on the list than Uncle Tony. So that's all that matters.
That's my brother.
I'm
Luke Allen.
my older brother.
Thanks, Luke.
All right. Thanks, dude.